On impossible. Achieving the impossible can be a hard thing to do. I would like to present my story on how I was able to solve a decades-old problem in a field where I had no training, without anyone's help, and with almost no money. I succeeded against all odds. I'm writing about this in order to inspire others. I have a university degree in engineering, mechanics, but after university I started working in computers. I've been looking for some time for information about creativity. I was trying to understand what are some of the mechanisms of creativity when I found this book that discussed its role in the brain. I was intrigued and I thought that it might be good to study neuroscience, the field that studies the brain, to get a better grasp of the creativity. At that time, I was working full-time as a software developer. I had no prior training in the neuroscience field, and I knew only the biology basics taught during elementary school. I started studying it after I came from work and in weekends. I did not know anyone working in the field, so I went on Amazon website and I bought a large, 1,000 pages introductory book based on the buying rank. I started reading it, but I wasn't able to understand much because I had little biological basic knowledge. After finishing it, I went back and I started reading again some of the chapters. I kept reading them again and again in order to solidify the basics. I remember vividly how hard it was to learn a new field after coming home from work. I read some chapters 10 or 12 times. After more than 8 months, things have started to become easier and I was ready to move on. I was determined. I had an overview of the entire neuroscience field and I found out that the computational aspect is influential about the brain, so I decided to go in that direction. I went and picked up from Amazon another overview book, around 300 pages, about this subfield. The book has a lot more depth than the previous one, so I had to change my learning method. After reading 3 chapters, I realized that I needed to go depth first as opposed to breadth first, as was the case with the previous book. I started reading the first chapter, and whenever I found a new term that was novel to me, I went and searched for it on the internet. I also went through each of the chapter references and read each paper from the internet. Most of the scientific papers were freely available on the internet. After almost 1 year, I managed to finish the second book. Because I read most of the references, I got to the point where I was reading about 2,000 papers. I was thorough. From then on, I started thinking about various hypotheses. I didn't have access to a laboratory or equipment, so I wasn't able to test any of those hypotheses. I found software that simulates brain processes, but those programs were incomplete. I had to do a lot of thinking. When a hypothesis didn't work, I went and read more papers, and I went on to the next hypothesis. I repeated this process again and again and again. I was relentless. Eventually, after 3 years, I came up with an idea that was different and stranger than every other hypothesis. At that point, a lot of the brain mechanisms were starting to make a lot of sense. From then on, I spent almost 10 months trying to invalidate that idea, to make sure that it was indeed the solution to the problem. As part of the validation process, I did the world's largest brain simulation. All hard work eventually pays off, just not right away.